Good morning everyone and welcome to our keynote address for Big Sky 2012. My name's Susan Smith. I'm the Manager of Libraries and Heritage. And I suppose, I was going to mention housekeeping later, but could I remind everyone to turn off their mobile phones, please? Thank you. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the people of Yamaji country, and pay respects to the elders and to knowledge embedded forever within the Aboriginal custodianship of country. I'd also like to thank the sponsors of Big Sky 2012, without whose support we wouldn't be able to hold the festival. Although there are many sponsors involved this weekend, today's keynote address is brought to you by Healthway. Their message, Act, Belong, Commit, encourages everyone in the community to keep mentally, physically and socially active in order to have a sense of belonging, a purpose in life. These things contribute to happiness and good mental health. I'm sure Big Sky provides an example of how the community can be stimulated both mentally and socially. I'd also like to let you know that today's session is being streamed live through the library's website, www.library.cgg.wa.gov.au. It'll also be loaded onto the website as a DVD later, so you'll be able to revisit or to remind your friends to listen to Judy's amazing words. Judy Nunn's a household word to many Australians. She grew up in Perth, but moved to Sydney to pursue a career in acting at an early age. Her career has been long, illustrious, and multifaceted. After combining her internationally successful acting career with script writing for television and radio, Judy decided in the 80s to turn her career to prose. The result was 2 adventure novels for children, which remain extremely popular, not only in Australia but in Europe. Embarking on adult fiction in the early 90s, Judy's 3 novels, The Glitter Game, Centre Stage and Araluen, set respectively in the worlds of television, theatre and film, became instant bestsellers. Her subsequent bestsellers, Cal, Beneath the Southern Cross, Territory, Pacific, Heritage, Flood Tide, Maralinga and Tiger Men, confirm her position of one of Australia's leading popular novelists. So it's now my great pleasure to welcome Judy Nunn to present the keynote address for Big Sky 2012.
Thanks, Susan. Well, first of all, I do have to, sincerely thank Susan and her fabulous, hard-working team, the Big Sky gang, for the warmest of welcomes. This is a truly great festival already, and I haven't yet done a gig in it. But I mean, we were just embraced like family, taken over to the Abrolhos, this rare and wonderful treat. And of course, you put a gang of artists, writers and artists, on a place like the Abrolhos. And I mean, oh by golly, we've all come away with new books in our heads. And for me, it was a special treat because one of my books, Territory, has a secondary story going all the way through. It is in actual fact the story of the Batavia. So it was a real, as the word we all applied to it was a privilege. So thanks, Gero. I also have another very, very strong attachment to Gero in the form of my big brother Rob and his wife Dee, who are here in the audience. Put your hand up, Rob. Where are you? Oh, there you are, yeah. Rob and his wife Dee, and of course their daughter Corey and her husband Tristan and their 3 boys. So I have an extended family here in Gero. So I do actually feel a bit of a part of Geraldton, as well as naturally Western Australia, because this is my home state. Anyway, I thought, funnily enough, I was going to just start on a bit with my background, my own particular love of books, this being, of course, the National Year of Reading. So I'm going to talk a bit about books and then probably tell you a few risque stories. I like to get the odd laugh. But something occurred to me when I brought my name tag to make sure that I wear it throughout the day when we go to university. And, of course, the lovely little byline of reading between the lines. And it literally, as Susan was driving me here in the car, I recalled something that my father always said. Do anybody remember the days of aerograms? When we used to write letters and there were aerograms and you just had that one page, a little back part that you could write on. Well, Dad would write to me in London and it would be Joodlewoo, family nickname, Joodlewoo, and then a half an inch space, and then Hope all's well with you. Another half an inch space. Fine over here. Good catch at Rotto last weekend. 5 Jewies. Anything that wasn't a Jewfish to my father was a neighbour fish. Give it to the neighbours. All my love, Dad. And that would take the whole aerogram. And I told him off about this. I wrote back and I said, hey, Dad, can you just write a bit more? And he said, don't ever bother reading the words. It's the spaces in between that count. A great way to cop out, isn't it? Clever old bugger. Anyway, I thought I'd tell you, as I say, my initial and very early love affair with books. And it came about in the most peculiar way. I was born extremely myopic. I mean, to be politically non-correct, I was blind as a bat. And somehow or other, I got away with this, would you believe it, until I was virtually 10, turning 10. And my mother and father were not stupid people. My mother was an ex-school teacher, actually. So you'd never get away with that these days. But what it does to a kid who actually does have a disadvantage, like, say, a kid with a hearing disability, they'll pretend they can hear. Or dyslexia. They'll somehow, they become cunning and devious. They don't want to be different from other kids. And for me to become a cunning little liar was actually very much out of character, because I can't tell lies. I don't mean to say, oh, aren't I a good, excuse me, honourable person, etc. I'm just no good at lying. I don't qualify to be a woman. I don't have that wonderful devious thing that so many of my female friends have. Very dear friend of mine who was going to try and come up for the festival from Perth, actually, she said, oh, Judy, she said, all of your heroines in your books, they're all you. They're all noble, honourable people. Believe you me, I'm not noble, I'm not honourable. But she said, all of the actual bitches that you write, they're all me. And in that area, she is correct. She is so devious and so manipulative. But anyway, there I am as this little kid, and I'm learning how to be a cunning little liar, to cover up the fact that I have this horrible suspicion that I might actually be dumb. So Mum and Dad would be saying, oh, Jew, they'd be standing on the balcony, looking out over Freshwater Bay, where we grew up in Claremont, one of the really filthy rich and famous to live there now. We weren't, but we had this beautiful old rambling family home. And Mum would be saying, oh, darling, look at the lovely boat out there with the yellow spinnaker, isn't it pretty? And I'm going, yeah, where, Mum, where? All I could see is sort of like blobs, and I know the river. I've been swimming in it, grew up in it. But I couldn't really see. But I eventually, and Mum would say, because I certainly was not inhibited in becoming shy with my disability, I talked. I was a talkative thing, and very hyperactive. Some things don't change, you see. But anyway, Mum would say, no, calm down, dear, calm down. Look where I'm pointing. It became a lot easier to just go, oh, yes, that's lovely. Oh, wow. And at school, would you believe this? I would always head straight, in a new form, I would head straight to the front seat. And the teachers didn't mind that at all, because they thought I was a shocking little show-off. And if they put me up the back seat, I would do nothing but talk anyway. I'd talk to whoever was near me, I'd talk. The reason being that I couldn't see what was going on down there, so there was nothing to captivate my interest. But when I got a bit older and you had to read things on the blackboard, I could see what was dead in front of me, but something up there, I'd get up out of my seat and I'd walk there to have a look. The penny didn't even drop then, because the teachers would say, what's the matter with you? And I'd say, look, this is how cunning I was. I'd say, the sun is coming through that window and it's flaring on the blackboard right there from where I'm sitting. I'm having some trouble. So all of these devious tricks you learn because you don't want the rest of the kids to discover that you're probably a bit stupid. Now, I got discovered actually mainly through riding my bicycle. I kept getting run over. One time I remember Mum was out the front of our Butte home that we had, this old, as I say, rambling old family home, and I sort of did a U-E on my bike, to come in towards the front, and this poor little old man who was fortunately travelling at no more than, say, about 5 k's an hour. Oh, in those days it was miles, of course. And he skidded into me. Off I came off my bike and everything, just, got a bit of a shin thing and elbows scratched, and picked myself up. And the poor man was on the verge of having a heart attack. He got out of the car. And Mum came running over and he said, give her some aspirin in hot water and lemon. Give her some aspirin in hot water and lemon. Mum took him inside and gave him 2 aspirin in hot water and lemon. But the penny really did drop when I drove my bicycle off a cliff. It wasn't really a cliff, it was natural jetty at Rottnest Island. And Rob and the boys, that we'd got our bikes off the old Zephyr, and they're taking off, and I'm behind them, you know, and I'm the younger one, and I'm pedalling away, and I just went straight over the side of Natural Jetty, which is virtually a cliff face. The bike stayed a bit towards the top, and I tumbled down, and that was when Mum turned to Bob, and she said, "Bob, I think we'd better take her to the opticians or to an oculist." So they took me to an oculist, and the first was Ben Sankin. And the first thing Ben Sankin said, he had a myopic daughter who'd been wearing glasses since she was 2, and I'm bordering on 10. And he said to Mum, he said, "Is she very advanced in her reading?" And Mum said, "She lives in books." And he said, "That's one of the first signs of a myopic child, because in books, they have no handicap. They see the words, they see the worlds in the books, not through the eyes of a myope, but with great clarity through the brain, and you know." And Mum very proudly said, "Oh yes, she's a voracious reader. She's even writing her own book." And it was called Dirk the Runaway Orphan. It was utterly plagiaristic. I had fallen in love with Mr. R.M. Ballantyne's Coral Island, and discovered that Dirk was not only the name of a dagger, but could be the name of a boy. So my Dirk the Runaway Orphan sort of says everything. Dirk was an orphan who ran away and got involved in a shipwreck, and like everything that happened to the people in Coral Island. But anyway, I was about 9 chapters into it. Then I got glasses. Suddenly I could see. And this is the other thing. My mother, of course, felt so guilty that it had taken so long to discover me, my myopia. And I said, "Mum, I can see the leaves on the trees." I knew what leaves were. I'd seen bushes at, eye-level height. But I'd never seen the leaves growing high up in the trees. Trees were always a big bowl of green on top of a brown trunk, like kids paint them, you know. So Mum just put her head down in shame, hung her head in shame. But indeed, I've got no worries about having been born myopic, because it just bred this great love of books that has never left me. The only thing is, suddenly, when I gained all that extra confidence, as if I needed any, by suddenly being able to see, I thought, no, I don't think I'll be a writer now, I think I'll be an actor. So I put the writing on hold for about 30 years, and off I went and became an actor. And as Susan said, I went off to Sydney, and then I went off to London for about 5.5, close to 6 years. And I was working predominantly in the theatre, my great love of theatre, and also radio, the theatre of the mind, which we all loved, the old golden days of radio drama. Wish they were still here. Then I came back from London, and I'd other stints in the theatre, but then before long, television claimed me, and I have a few dubious claims to fame, one of them being initiating the first lesbian kiss on Australian television. Yes, back in the 70s, way before the Americans came out and did it. We led the troops. And there's a very good story. I might tell you about that later on if I have the time, maybe during Q&A. Then I did a show called Sons and Daughters, and a stint in Prisoner, and of course 13 years in Home and Away. Rather amusingly, at one time I was to air in all 3. They were doing reruns, as they do in England, and the English fans have to be seen to be believed, truly. Oh, they are passionate about their soaps. And I was to air in 3 of them, and all these fan letters that would come, and one of them said it was Prisoner, Sons and Daughters, and Home and Away. And this woman wrote and said, "I got such a shock when I changed channels the other day and I saw Irene had gone to prison." Irene was Sons and Daughters, and she turned into Prisoner. I did have a real beauty that I'd like to share with you too, from which I love, from Sons and Daughters. Hang on, a bit dry. And I was playing, as I say, this awfully nice character called Irene for close on 2 years. And Irene's son was dying. He's a 22-year-old, and she was knitting him a jumper. He was going away to Switzerland to die. I don't know why he had to go to Switzerland to die, but anyway, he did. And I was knitting this jumper, and I can't knit. So the props man would go home and knit about, and the jumper over this dying period of this son before he took off for Switzerland. He was on a 6-month contract, so we had 6 months' worth of jumper and imminent death. And the jumper grew, of course. And finally he went off to die in the jumper. And years and years later, they're replaying Sons and Daughters, and I get this letter from a British fan saying, "Look, I do hope you won't find this question in extremely bad taste, but I simply have to ask you, could you possibly send me the pattern of the jumper you were knitting for your dying son?" Isn't that good? I love British fans. But then we'll move along to, of course, this is the only part I actually really have to read because I'm going to tell you what happened to Ailsa in Home and Away. I gather from a lot of attention I get from people out in the street that we've got quite a lot of Home and Away watchers in Gero. So I can't remember what Ailsa got up to, so I have to read it. I can't remember. But she was a true blue Aussie soap trooper. She went through the gamut. And this is it, okay? She experienced every possible hell on earth. I'm adding them up. Ailsa went to jail as a young girl for killing her drunken father. They didn't tell me that when I took the role. I only discovered it after I'd been playing it for 6 months. Anyway, she went to jail for killing her drunken father. She suffered postnatal depression and considered killing her baby. Fortunately, she didn't. Many years later, she discovered another, by now adult, long-lost child who was the result of a rape she'd suffered while she was in prison. Now, poor old Ailsa was held hostage at gunpoint and knife point. She was bound, gagged, bashed, drowned, and brought back to life. She was in a coma, had her life support disconnected, miraculously came back to life, subsequently sunk into madness, and eventually recovered. Finally, she died. But even that didn't stop her. She came back as a demented figment of her husband Alf's imagination. It's good, isn't it? Such are the wonderful gymnastic workings of the soap writer's mind. And I say this with a great deal of admiration. I wrote the soap for about a year, some earlier episodes of Neighbours and another show called Possession. Glad I didn't stay with it too long because, you know, but you learn a lot. They're very clever minds, as you can see by that. But then, anyway, as Susan said, eventually I decided to turn my hand to prose. That was when sort of Dirk revisited me. Fortunately not in the form of Dirk the runaway orphan, but I did actually start out, the first of my kids' books was based on a shipwreck on an island, but I mean the kid actually was blind and he astral travelled. He left his body and travelled, and it was a tie-up with the smuggling of indigenous birds. So it was a little bit more modern than Mr. Ballantyne's Coral Island, but it wasn't altogether plagiaristic. But so that was my foray into writing narrative, and then I leapt into adult fiction. And here we get another tie-up, of course, with Geraldton. Two of my books, Territory, as I mentioned, deals a great deal with the wreck of the Batavia, which was a passion that both Robert and I inherited from our mother Nancy, who had what she called her grasshopper mind. Mum had the best mind. And she inspired in us this love of this compelling story. I mean, a loathsome story of this ghastly Cornelius and the wreck and the mutiny of the Batavia. So that I use very, very much throughout Territory. And, of course, the next book, or not the next book, but a couple of books back, I wrote a book called Flood Tide, which actually opens up in Geraldton and very much tied up around the crayfishing industry, of course, also bringing the Batavia into it. But actually, Rob, I didn't tell you, when we were over on the Abrolhos, Malcolm was showing me the mesh that they entrapped the Purulus in, because a character in this book, Flood Tide, was, in the early days, very much based upon my brother and our childhood growing up in Perth. And, of course, Rob was studying Purulus, etc., when he was doing his thesis, finishing his uni degree. So I actually rang my brother when I was going to write Flood Tide, because it is the moral core of the book actually is very environmental issues. And Rob's an environmentalist. So I rang my brother from Sydney and I said, Rob, I'm going to write this book, and it's got a very strong environmental theme in it, including oil spills and everything, which was his specialty. And I said, if you'll come on board and be my official researcher, normally I do all my research myself, but I needed somebody who really knew what they were talking about. I said, if you'll come on board, I'll do the book. If you won't, it'll be another book. And he said, is this blackmail? I said, bloody oath it is. So he came on board, and it was a great experience. But it had a funny side to it, because, as I say, my character, Mike McAllister, started out very much pretty attractive, sort of heroic figure, and he used to lair around uni on this 500cc motorbike. And all the girls were mad about him, and he was very handsome and very adventurous, and Rob Nunn's going, oh, it's me, oh, this is me, oh, me, you know. And then eventually Mike McAllister, actually, before too long, he gets tied up in a very, very ugly incident. Most unattractive thing that happens. And Rob rang me concerned from Perth. He said, Judy, he said, I wouldn't do that. I said, Rob, you're not Mike McAllister. Then I get another phone call. He's read a bit more of the book and he said, gee, you've written yourself as a real dickhead, haven't you? I said, the sister Jules is not me, Rob. So anyway, he really lived the book. Now, I'm going to actually, how long have I, because I want to leave plenty of time for questions. I like questions. Shall I leap into questions, or will I talk a little? Hey? No, I'm not allowed to. How long? Will I keep talking for a little bit more? Okay. Well, yeah, no, because I'll touch on the style of books that I have come to write now. As Susan said in her intro, for my first 3 books I stuck to the KISS principle, you know, keep it simple, stupid, write about what you know. Then in my 3rd book, I don't want to become formula. I know I must have developed a style that is attractive to people. My books sell very well. Hurrah, touch wood. There's an actor in me still. Keep touching wood when you say something like that. I'm so privileged to have, by now, a loyal following of readers, which I cannot begin to tell you how thrilling I find this, that somebody goes on my journey, but of course they go their own journey because we all travel our own journey when we lose ourselves in a book. But what has proved popular, obviously, with my books now is I write what I want to write, what excites me. And what does excite me is this country. I am an Australian writer. I write about Australians and Australia. And so I usually find a place or a time that will interest and excite me and base my characters there. They may mingle with real historical characters. They may go through what real people went through, of course. I'll be out there on the battlefields, etc. So to do this, of course, requires a great deal more work. You're not writing about what you know or you've lived through. You have to research. And I find in researching the greatest thrill. First of all, I was very inhibited, and I'd get Bruce, my husband Bruce, who's here and part of the festival too. I'd get Bruce to do a whole lot of, look, you look that up for me, darling, you do it. And now the inspiration of research, of course, is you look up your facts and figures to make sure you get it right. Research 100%, then throw out 80%, and hopefully get that 20% that you retain correct. Believe you me, there's a sea of readers who'll remind you if you've stuffed it up, and very often that'll happen. But if you try and pile in everything that you've learned, of course, you know, suddenly you become pedantic and you're trying to teach people, look, aren't I clever? I've done all this research. But in doing this research, of course, you bump into that time and time again, that wonderful adage that fact is stranger than fiction. And it really is. I mean, if you look at the Batavia story itself, I mean, look at the whole coincidences of these guys are just about to mutiny, boom, shipwreck, you know. I mean, poor old Webby Hayes is just about to cop it and everything, boom, boom. There, Pelsart's arrived back with his rescue ship, and you suddenly think, if I made that up and put it in a book, all those critics would say, oh, no, you're relying far too much on coincidence. Well, no, bugger you, I'm not. These things actually happen, you know, 6 degrees of separation and all of that. That's the wonderful thing for me, that actually in researching to get your facts and figures right, you suddenly think, oh, I have to put that in. People have to discover this. And in no more greater way did I do it than I think in Maralinga, which is a couple of books back. Well, not my latest. My latest is Tigermen set in Tasmania, but without the Royal Commission in 1984 and the findings coming out in 85, nobody would know what went on at Maralinga. I still believe that nobody knows the whole thing at all because everything was conducted in a need-to-know basis. You know, you guys do that, you guys do that. Don't ever communicate about what you're doing. And normally, say in a military outpost way in the outback, men are encouraged to talk, to breed a camaraderie. No, not at Maralinga. You know, you are not to know what this guy's doing, this guy's not to know what you're doing. So you get all these conflicting stories that even came out from the Royal Commission. So I had a nice sense of whistleblowing with that. I got some great reactions of people saying, gee, I didn't know that went on. So that pleases me too. So now I think I'm going to have a big swig of water and see if people have got some questions for me. Hang on. My husband. Oh, that's 5 minutes.
After you ask everybody if you should keep talking,
Yeah.
after you ask me to sit in the audience and tell you when you had 5 minutes to go.
Oh, yeah, but I'd like some to answer some questions. That'll get there. Why not? Oh, otherwise I'll just tell some more funny anecdotes that I've got a sea of them. Yes?
Do you think you'll always write history? Was the history a passion that you've had all your life?
No, it's not. As I say, when I first started, I made the break from the Keep It Simple, Stupid ones. My publishers then, Pan Macmillan, they, after the first one, Glitter Game, which is a frothy kiss and tell, it's a satire. It's a total... excuse me, I have to... No, it's taking the mickey. I won't say what I wanted to say. But it's taking the mickey out of television. It's very satirical. Then it's the first and only time I've done a 2-book deal. They'd like me to do a 3-book deal. I won't do it. You're wandering around with this whopping great cross. It's, you know, it's very, very stressful. But I did do a 2-book deal. And the Glitter Game did so well that the publishers were calling me Australia's Jackie Collins. You know, I mean, it was that sort of frothy type. That's not the sort of book I wanted to keep writing. So I said, OK, the 2-book deal, and it'll be show business. The next one will be in the theatre. The cover of it, actually, they're all out with brand new, beautiful backlist covers. It's very like this, beautiful red. Oh, I love the theatre and all of that. And that was called Centre Stage. But I drew that out to 2 generations. Going through 2 generations, and it ended up becoming a thriller. A very black character, a man obsessed with death, wanted to watch people die. And one of the woman in my agents, she's got a lovely deep brown voice, and she said, "Judy, I'm looking at you in altogether new eyes." You know, I don't know where this death fetish came from. But, you know, these characters, just, they're there, they're living somewhere. And then the 3rd book, Araluen, as I had promised the publishers, yes, it did end up going into the world of film. But wanting to, you know, spread my wings and test myself further, I opened it up in 1850 with the ancestor of my one day to become movie mogul, coming out on the bark Henrietta and settling next door to Dr. Penfold in the Barossa Valley and becoming a winemaker. And so I had to, you know, make myself a full book on oenology and viticulture and all of this sort of stuff. And that's when I suddenly thought, wow, this is really interesting, studying up. And so 150 pages later, I've got the grandson who's going to be a movie mogul, but at this stage, he's there with the cocaine wars with Kate Lee and Tilly Devine and the brothels and everything in Sydney. And I still haven't got him into making movies. So I discovered a great joy then of mingling the fact and fiction, and from then on that led me into right. But I don't want to call myself any form of historian. Believe you me, I'm not. I write novels, fictional novels. But that's what led me into this historical thing, was actually discovering in myself that it's not as daunting as all that. It's inspiring, the research. Yeah. So will I tell the leave that for yes. Well, I always say, you know, it's a bit like asking a parent to nominate a favourite child, really. Each book is a great passion to me. You know, I'm very, very lucky in the sense that really at my age, sure, this is the 12th book I'm on at the moment, and as it's 2 years for me to write a book, that's 24 years of being published, of adult fiction. So I've been writing for a long time, but I feel as passionate about my books as I did about my acting and the theatre when I was 19. So it's like being reborn. I mean, I'm very, very lucky. I mean, because I guess if you were to cast around and think, oh, I want to be terribly rich and famous, what will I do? Oh, I know, I think I'll write books. No, dumb call, you know. Or I know, I think I'll be an actor. No. They're 2 very dicey careers, and I've been very, very lucky to be passionate about both of them. So it's a very long, wordy answer to a difficult question. regarding which favourite books. I can see the holes in all of my books, and the day I think I can't, then I think I'll put the pen down or turn the computer off. So I can see the holes and I can see the good parts of them. I think some of my books may be better than others, but each time when I get somebody who's read them all, believe you me, it's so interesting to find who likes which what. I mean, for instance, my brother, the only book of mine that he really didn't like and he didn't finish was Beneath the Southern Cross. And I said, why, Rob? And he said, because people kept dying all the time. And I said, well, it goes over 7 generations of families. They're going to die. And I must say, I do love writing a good death scene. But, and yet, you see, many women particularly, it's got a full family tree in the front. And many women nominate that as their favourite book of mine. Because if you look at most families, when somebody's doing a family tree, you'll usually find it's a woman. Anybody else noted that? I mean, there'll always be exceptions that will prove the rule. But, I mean, most in our family, we've got 2 historians in our family, cousin Margot and cousin Jenny, from both sides of the family. And so I think women love family trees, books with family trees and things in. But, you know, yes, Malcolm. Oh, that's always an impossible one. A favourite author. No, a favourite author, a favourite book. No. I'm very, very intrigued lately by Lionel Shriver. I mean, after reading, you know, We Need to Talk About Kevin, which is a very gruesome book, but technically, We Need to Talk About Kevin is so clever to do everything via a series of letters. And, you know, the psychological aspect of it. I think she's so clever. Then I read Post-Birthday World, which I just found the most wonderful book on human relationships. And just recently, the New Republic, which is, I think it's a flawed book, but it's frightfully clever. I think she's very clever. Anybody else? Yeah. That's an interesting one. Do I find plot development, character development, you know, easy, or which is my particular strength or something? I think, to me, characters are the most important thing, both as a reader and a writer. I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm just saying my preference, that I could read the most brilliantly convoluted, well-constructed plot, but if I don't really care about the characters, the book for me is out the window. I could read a very thinly plotted narrative, but if I care for those characters, I'm lost, I'm gone. And that's the way I am with the writing. Some of my books have quite a strong plot, storyline, and some of them are just given over a great deal to characters. So I'm eeny, meeny, you know, I would certainly let the characters lead me, myself personally, in the writing. But for some people, no, that's the people who love, you know, crime fiction and plot-driven stuff. That's their bag. That's great, you know, room for us all. Yes. Yes. You don't have to, you know. Uh-huh. The locket. This is good. This is a good question. I like this. I have a secondary story going through my novel of Territory, which is based, you know, in the Northern Territory, and the secondary story is all linked around the Batavia, and the actual story of the Batavia itself is correct, and I've got an author's note at the end about what happened for those people who wanted to follow up and look. But the one area of absolute fiction that lends itself to the Batavia story there is that Lucretia van der Meulen, who was a real character on the Batavia, she has this locket made The locket is fictional. She gives it to a young man who actually escapes the mutineers and makes it to the mainland. Fictional character. The reason I did this is I wanted the locket, there's a big Indigenous aspect to the story, and I wanted the locket to become the thread of the story. So by taking the locket ashore in 1629, it passes through the hands of Aboriginal people, through to the early surveyors laying the telegraph line. So you actually get an historical, and then it weaves itself into the current day. It ends up in Chinatown, and it weaves itself into the current day because the girl has discovered that she's black, that she has Aboriginal blood in her, and she's told on her 18th birthday she was adopted. So she wants to discover her roots, her ancestry, etc. She takes up Indigenous anthropology at WA University and discovers, and of course this is all absolute fanciful, but she discovers the drawings of this sort of totem which Aboriginal people did not draw, etc. My brother was a big help with me in this one too, actually. I relied a bit on Rob for some information regarding, you know, geological facts and some anthrop. And so she's actually tracing my locket that is fictional. So the reason I brought the locket aside was so that I could have some early history of the territory in WA. Yeah, thank you. I was quite pleased with the way I could, because the fact is that I'd been wanting to write about the Batavia because I'd been so absorbed by my mother's love of it. And it's fitted in perfectly because it gave me the excuse to get the locket ashore. Yeah, anybody else? Oh, you brought that one up. Did Bruce tell you to bring it up, or? It's, well, how much longer have I got to go? Because it's the one to go out on. Okay, all right. Okay, gird your loins. When I came back from England, when you were an Aussie in those days, you went off to London to work in the theatre. You know, you didn't go to Hollywood to be a star, you know, in those days. I'm talking about way back in the late 60s. So you couldn't go there with an Aussie accent. There was no such thing as Australian plays, and you had to go. So I came back, talked frightfully. You know, my brother took the mickey out of me right royally, you know, but I did. I was frightfully. And so everybody thought I was very sophisticated, and so did I. And I wasn't. I was still very naive. And I took on this show called The Box, and I was playing the character called Vicky Stafford, who was bisexual. I mean, she was rampantly sexual. Nobody was safe around her. She took her own nephew to bed. In the form of Steve J. Spears, who wrote that wonderful play, The Elocution of Benjamin Franklin. And Steve, to this day, and he was playing my nephew, and I had a bed scene with Steve. And for years after that, I'd bump into Steve in the street, and he'd say, "Hey, auntie." But anyway, she was pretty rampant. Now, I don't know if there's many people would recall the show called The Box. The titles opened up with this old-fashioned box television set being blown up, you know. And in actual fact, yeah, and it was a taking the mickey. I based my glitter game book that I was based around The Box because it was an absolute satire. The Box could be seen as a rather wicked soap with homosexuality and nudity and that lesbian kiss. It could be seen with all of those naughtinesses. It was actually a real, forgive me, I have to say it was a piss take of television. And it worked. Frank Thring, who was a very, very worldly, lovely man, actually, a wicked, naughty man. But, I mean, he was a subscriber to the opera and the ballet, and Frank would not go out on the nights The Box was on. He said, "Oh, it's so camp." And if anybody knew camp, believe you me, Frank knew camp. But it was a gorgeous send-up. But anyway, there I am, playing this rampantly, worldly, you know, bisexual. And I was out doing the show for about 2 years, and I was water skiing with the Obermann brothers and their wives at Lake Eildon. I was doing a series of voiceovers for their furniture business, and Max Obermann wanted me to put on a pair of, you know, his wife's short wetsuit pants. And I said, well, I mean, I grew up water skiing on Freshwater Bay, and I just wear your bikinis, you know. And he said, "Oh, no," he said, "Jude," he said, you know, you got to look after yourself. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you know, look after your television show. And I said, what, the box? And he told me in no uncertain terms, and I was absolutely horrified to discover that I'd been working in a show for 2 years, the title of which was a euphemism for a woman's genitalia. I had had no idea. And funnily enough, there was somebody many years later who proved to be even more naive than I, and this was in the late 80s, and it was when I was at this stage doing Home and Away, you know, the Ailsa, poor old Ailsa, and there was this big argument going on in the Channel 7 boardroom because Ellen DeGeneres had just come out doing her lesbian kiss on American television and coming out as, in real life herself, a lesbian, and doing the first, you know, mainstream commercial television kiss in America, and it was headlines all over the place. And it led to this big discussion in at Channel 7 about who'd done the first lesbian kiss on Australian television. And one bloke was saying it was Maggie Kirkpatrick as the freak in Prisoner, who did indeed do lesbian kisses all over the place by then, I think. And little Michael Shepherd, this publicist bloke, said, no, it wasn't Maggie, it was Judy Nunn. And this fight ensued. And Michael got really crazy. Maggie Kirkpatrick, Judy Nunn, Maggie, Judy. And he got so frustrated because he knew he was right. And he jumped to his feet and he said, no. He said, Judy Nunn was the first actress in Australia to kiss a woman on the box. So that's me done. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, wasn't that wonderful? And it's a great start to our Big Sky 2012. Can I please remind you that Judy will be out the front. You can buy her books and they'll all be signed, I'm sure. And then I hope you'll join us up at the Geraldton University for the rest of the weekend, because we have some fantastic other people who are here. So once again, thank you so much for coming along, and we'll see you over the weekend.